I stumbled upon 3 terrifying true summer horror stories that will haunt my dreams forever. I never should have opened that door. The moment my hand touched the cold, rusty handle, a shiver rippled down my spine. What was waiting for me on the other side? I could feel my heart racing as I went through my normal routine, mindlessly sipping my morning coffee, yet an uneasy feeling crept up my throat. I knew I shouldn't have indulged my curiosity. Outside, the sun beat down fiercely, but inside, the air was thick and suffocating. Shadows danced in the corners, and whispers slithered around me, words I couldn't quite hear. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a warning. I glanced around my small apartment, everything seemed the same, yet nothing was right. The darkness in the corners was taunting me, begging me to look closer. Then, there it was. A faint scratching sound, like claws against wood. I froze, coffee cup trembling in my hands, spilling the bitter liquid onto the table. Panic surged through me. I wasn't alone. A dull thump echoed from behind the door, a desperate plea for entry or perhaps a sinister invitation. I strained to listen, every tick of the clock growing louder, pressing against my ears. I swear, the painting on the wall shifted, the eyes of the woman in the portrait following my every move, her lips curled into a mocking grin. My breath quickened, I was being watched. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat, a lump of pure fear choking me. I found myself inching toward the door, my instincts screaming at me to turn back. As my hand reached for the knob again, the scratching turned into a raspy whisper. "Let me in," it seemed to echo from within the walls themselves, a sound filled with despair and longing. I stumbled back, the world around me closing in. My fingers tingled, I could almost feel the chill radiating from the door. Everything grew still for a moment. My heart pounded, a thunderous war drum in the silence. And then, a slammed door bursting open, as if someone or something had finally lost its patience. The darkness beyond spilled like ink into my living room, swallowing everything. I stood frozen, the hairs on my arms stood straight up, as I caught a glimpse of something shifting in the shadows. My breath caught. What was it? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference, let's connect. The room pulsed with an unholy energy, a thick, oppressive fog creeping through the doorway, the air laden with the scent of decay. A small figure stepped through the threshold, its outline barely distinguishable from the shadows that clung to it. My pulse quickened as I instinctively took a step back, the back of my knees colliding with the edge of the couch, reminding me of the solid ground beneath me. "Please let me in," it croaked, a voice that churned my insides, laced with echoes of countless tormented souls. The figure emerged further into the dim light, and my stomach twisted in primal fear, a grotesque blend of childlike features and something far more sinister. Its eyes were sunken and lifeless, black voids that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and its skin, a sickly pallor, stretched tightly over bony limbs. My thoughts raced. I had to run. I had to escape this horror wrapped in a fragile guise. But my limbs felt paralyzed, weighted down by an unseen force, as though the air had thickened around me. "What do you want?" I managed to whisper, the words barely escaping my mouth. The figure took another step, its movements erratic and disjointed, like a marionette whose strings had been frayed, unpredictable yet purposeful. "We need your help," it rasped, and for an instant, I thought I saw a flicker of desperation behind those soulless eyes. "Help me, get away from me!" I shouted, the scream tearing from my throat, my body finally responding, bolting to the kitchen. I fumbled with the drawer where I kept the knives, heart thundering in my chest. Just then, the lights flickered, casting erratic shadows that seemed to dance and swirl, enhancing the grotesque visage of the figure lurking beyond the threshold. "That I can show you what lies beyond," it hissed, as if held together by the darkness itself. "You don't have to be afraid." Panic clawed at me as I clutched the knife, its weight a small comfort in my trembling hands. But even the steel couldn't shield me from the penetrating gaze of the abomination. I met its eyes, and for a brief moment, I felt the haunting tug of curiosity overshadowing my fear. What could it possibly show me that I didn't already dread? With a sudden shift, the entity lunged. I swung the knife instinctively, but it passed right through the figure as though it were nothing more than smoke. An icy sensation shot through me as I registered what had just happened, a realization both perplexing and chilling. The room went eerily silent, the shadowy figure now mere inches from my face, its breath a rancid whisper against my skin. I stumbled back, my back hitting the counter. "You need to understand," it urged, its tone shifting from pleading to something more urgent, an almost frenzied conviction lacing every word. "The door you opened, it leads to something worse. They want you to." Panic morphed into racing horror as a haunting wail emitted from beyond the door I had carelessly opened moments earlier. It was a cacophony of wretched voices, clawing and scraping, begging for freedom. I felt my sanity erode under their despairing cries, the shadow figure smirking as if relishing my dread. "It's already begun," it murmured, and with that confession, time itself seemed to stretch, the air growing thick with the pungent smell of fear. I felt a pull, an insidious force drawing my gaze back to the door, now faintly swaying as if something from within was trying to break free, and to my horror, I saw it had unmistakable outline of a hand pressing against the wood, long, bony fingers stretching toward the weak light spilling from my apartment. The shadow's grin widened and its laughter echoed, a sound laced with malice and hunger, shaking my resolve. "Open it," it urged, and as I stood paralyzed in terror, I felt the weight of countless souls behind the door, their longing to escape gnawing at me. It was an invitation I should have never entertained, yet it wrapped around me with soft, insidious tendrils. The door cracked, a sliver of darkness spilling forth like an omen. I was lost, teetering at the precipice of oblivion. Every inch of me screaming to step back, but something deep within urged me forward, toward the darkness calling my name. My breath hitched in my throat, and for the first time, I began to understand it wasn't just my curiosity that had opened that cursed door, it was something far more ancient and vile that lay waiting within. The whispers grew in intensity, an agonizing collective cry vibrating through the walls, and just as I thought I might turn and flee, I heard a very distinct sound of a second voice, echoing behind the first, and then another and another, "Let us in." The voices crescendoed, intertwining into a horrible symphony that seized my heart with terror. They were indistinct yet maddeningly familiar, like echoes of forgotten nightmares clawing their way back into consciousness. My mind raced, searching for the fragments of memories that could explain this onslaught, but the figures behind the door clouded my thoughts. I could feel the presence of the shadow figure beside me, its cold, furtive energy setting my skin ablaze with goosebumps. "You hear them, don't you?" it rasped, as the chorus of pleas grew louder. "They long for use. They want you to choose. I forced my gaze away, focusing instead on the door, the wood splintering ever so slightly under the strain of unseen hands. A loud crack echoed through the room, an ominous reminder that whatever lurked beyond that threshold was desperate. A sickly curiosity clawed at my insides, but every rational part of me screamed to stay away. Then the air turned icy, as the lights flickered violently, casting distorted shapes across the walls. A child's silhouette morphed momentarily into something monstrous before settling back into the grotesque image of the figure in front of me. Its ghoulish eyes met mine, and the sincerity burned behind those voids sent a ripple of uncertainty through my spine. "They want your strength," it purred, its twisted grin widening. "Feed them your fear, your despair." In that moment, a voice broke through the clamor, a single, childlike tone, cutting through the chaos like a whisper of innocence amidst a raging storm. "Help us, please," it begged, splintering my resolve. Every instinct told me to run, yet the plea curled around my heart, anchoring me in place. Which child was this? Could it belong to one of those who had strayed beyond the door? Louder than before, the chorus howled, "Let us in!" And a dark wind surged from the door, rushing past me, battering away any semblance of safety, leaving behind a chill that froze me to the core. Without conscious thought, the knife slipped from my fingers, clattering against the floor, and every shadow in the room seemed to eagerly consume its metallic sheen. "You opened the door once," the figure rasped, its voice rising above the din. "Do it again. You could unleash so much more. You could save them." Suddenly, without warning, something unthinkable occurred. The door swung wide open with a malicious creak, and what spilled forth was darkness unlike anything I had ever encountered. Tendrils of shadow sifted through the air, snaking around my legs, clinging with an insidious greed, whispering sweet nothings of despair that promised liberation from the mundane horrors of existence. In the split second that the door lay open, I saw movement, numerous shapes surging toward the light like moths, their forms flickering with an unnatural energy while the voices melded into a unified wail. A multitude of faces twisted in agony, each one pleading for mercy, for release, their mouths forming silent screams that echoed within my mind. I stumbled backward, desperate to break their unholy grip, yet the entity beside me urged with soft insistence, "Let go, let them in." I pressed my hands to my ears, trying to drown out their cries, but the more I resisted, the more the shadows seemed to intensify. The air grew heavy, laden with sorrow, and the ground trembled beneath my feet. It was then that I felt something cold, slithering, creeping along my back, a hand, not of the figure, but one belonging to whatever lay within. The shadows surged, and I caught a fleeting glimpse of something monstrous and grotesque encroaching upon my world, something that should never have been set free. "Help us!" It echoed, a twisted echo of the child's voice I believed I had heard moments ago, transforming into a dark mockery. Frantically, I looked to the figure beside me, only to find it had morphed into a grotesque outline of those whom I'd seen in the doorway. Its features now echoed the combined agony of countless faces, drenched in malevolence. "They are merely lost and you can save them," it hissed, weaving closer with every syllable uttered. Then, in that harrowing moment, the shadows lunged. As they enveloped me, electric fear coursed through my body. This was not mere haunted whispers. No, they were hungry, and the shrouded void behind the door opened wider still, revealing a world of eternal shadows consuming all light, threatening to drown my very soul. Just as I felt the borders of my being fray, I understood with chilling clarity, it was no longer a matter of escape. I was already tethered to them. The faintest flicker of hope was snuffed out, replaced by dread, as the unwelcome and terrifying realization hit me like ice. "Join us," the chorus whispered, merging into one sinister chant that shook the walls as I felt the weight of those souls settle over me, an inescapable embrace. In a final act of desperation, I turned to flee, but in that very moment, the inky darkness surged forward, coiling around my legs and pulling me toward the yawning abyss. Familiar voices filled the air, the crisp laughter of innocence now twisted into horrific shrieks. "We've missed you then." Just as I thought I would be consumed, everything plunged into silence. I gasped for breath, disoriented in inky blackness, when suddenly, a blinding light burst forth, illuminating myriad figures circling me with hollow, expectant eyes. "Welcome back," they whispered, and in that heart-stopping second, I knew I had crossed a line I could never uncross. The door shut with a resonant finality behind me, sealing my fate, doom rising like a tidal wave. And then, I felt the insatiable hunger of the darkness press against me once more, whispering promises of eternal despair. The flickering light illuminated the shadows etched upon the walls, yet they seemed to dance in tandem with the soft whispers echoing around me. My heart throbbed like a drum trapped in a storm, each beat reverberating with the dread that coiled tighter around my chest. The figures surrounding me, once clothed in the soft glow of innocence, warped into ghastly specters, their eyes blackened voids full of insatiable longing. "Welcome back," they breathed once more, their voices intermingling into a sinister lullaby that tugged at my psyche. An unrelenting wave of nostalgia crashed over me, and I stumbled backward, trying to remember a time when this wasn't my reality. The ground beneath me seemed to pulse, a heartbeat that twisted my perception of everything I had once known. "This is where you belong." With us the murmurs morphed into a collective sigh, an eerie echo that sent chills racing down my spine. I stood there, every instinct screaming at me to run, but my limbs were bound in a thick, suffocating air that rendered flight impossible. All I could do was gaze into the drowning depths of those hollow eyes, which reflected fragments of lost souls twisted by despair. Something deep within me recoiled at the sight. "No!" I croaked, the sound barely louder than a whisper as I shook my head violently. "You're not real." But as I spoke, a cruel irony wrapped around me. Here I was, enveloped in a reality more grotesque than any fever dream. As I turned to make my escape, the world grew darker and grimmer. Deep shadows slithered across the floor, reaching eagerly for my heels with every step I attempted. Behind me, the voices escalated, their harmonization spreading throughout the room, a cacophony of horror that begged for release. "Don't leave us. We need you," they cried, now sounding like the very children I had tried so desperately to save that I stumbled against the floor, raw dread clawing at my throat. Then, piercing through the wailing, I heard the distinct sound of a familiar laughter, a sound so intertwined with joy and innocence that it shattered me. It echoed through the chamber, reverberating like a taunt. "Help us. Stay with us. You can't leave." Against all logic, I found myself drawn to it, a moth to a flame, feeling a painful yearning for those lost moments. All the pain and desolation I had tried to escape clawed back into focus as the darkness ebbed and flowed like a tempest around me. "Come dance with us," a sweet voice chimed, twirling toward me with a malicious joy. It was the face of a child, one I couldn't quite recall yet knew every single feature. The eyes glimmered with enticing mischief, inviting me into a world I had never intended to enter. Scattered shadows flickered, forming a circle like ghostly balloons, each one bursting with the memory of laughter that sent shivers dancing across my flesh. I felt lighter, thoughts spiraling into thoughts of freedom. But beneath that pristine surface lay an insidious twist. It was a trap. Join us in the eternal light, they beckoned, weaving closer, their sallow forms morphing with every blink, each reformation hinting at my own impending doom. There's no need to fear. Dread, however, was relentless. It sank its teeth into my consciousness. I closed my eyes to shut them out, squeezing my mind to force the visions away. But when darkness followed, it was heavier than despair, saturated with the cries of those anguished souls lost to shadow. I opened my eyes again, drawn back into that swirling mass of darkness. There was no escape. The swirling mass of shadows converged, pulling closer, closing in upon me. Their embrace began to take shape, morphing into something more tangible, more malevolent. Fingers, slender and sinister, reached out for my throat. Let me go! I screamed, desperation giving rise to a visceral surge of energy. I could feel the thrumming of my essence fighting against this darkness, pushing back against the tide of despair summoned by the anguished whispers, but then, with an abruptness that stole my breath, the grip tightened. I gasped as a new wave of chilling terror enveloped me. I was losing myself, fragments of my spirit tearing away, dissipating into that chaotic void. The flutter of hope faded as voices clawed at my conscience, the irrefutable truth that I was slipping away. Then, with a jolt that stung my very soul, I found myself standing alone in an empty corridor, dimly lit and shadowy. A door loomed at the far end, untouched yet exuding a sense of foreboding that made my skin prickle. I turned, convinced that I could hear them weeping, pleading, begging to re-enter my thoughts. As I took a trembling step toward the door, a manic laughter rang out, echoing through the desolation. You think you can leave? A chill ran through me as I realized, with agonizing clarity, that desperation didn't offer salvation. Then I felt it, an unseen presence coiling around my ankles, icy and constricting. I was not alone. And as the laughter grew louder, a radiant flicker burst through the shadows behind the door, illuminating an unmistakable figure, the child I had longed to save, now twisted into a silhouette of despair, little hands outstretched, as if caught in an eternal, anguished plea. That I need you, it cried, and my breath caught. Time seemed to freeze, and all I could think was that I was never meant to wander down this path. But with every heartbeat, the darkness loomed larger, ready to swallow me whole. Then the laughter crescendoed, blending with the wails and cries echoing through that desolate corridor. And suddenly, the door swung open. As the door creaked open, it emitted a harsh, spectral light that pierced the tremulous darkness wrapping around me. The glow's intensity made my skin feel like it was sizzling under its touch, pulling me closer, beckoning with a power I couldn't fathom. I hesitated, heart thumping in my chest as the ominous laughter rose in pitch, a cruel serenade that twisted my gut and sent icy fingers skittering along my spine. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, but the figure behind the threshold, the child, seemed to hold my gaze with an insatiable demand. Please, I need you, it whispered with a voice that resembled the haunting echoes of laughter turned hollow and despairing, a remnant of the innocence it once bore. As I took an uncertain step forward, the world swirled around me. That doorway was no mere passage, it was a vortex of despair, the threshold to my deepest fears laid bare. I could almost taste the metallic tang of panic rising in my throat as I studied the child's silhouette, unable to decipher the emotions etched on its face. Was it yearning, hatred, or something darker still? I crossed that threshold, the light enveloping me as I stumbled into the room. Once inside, I was struck by a sight that stills the breath in one's lungs. A child gone horribly wrong. Its eyes were a bottomless pit, reflecting the essence of unspeakable terror. It was a seemingly innocent visage twisted by inevitable sharp edges of pain and loss. Stay with me. The child boomed suddenly, mouth stretching far too wide, revealing rows of jagged, unnaturally sharp teeth. The room filled with flickers of light that pulsed rhythmically, illuminating the grotesque features of countless other children lingering in the shadows. They were all watching, every hollow eye fixating upon me, yet their bodies remained marred with the marks of time and decay. The walls began to thrum, vibrating with lifelike sounds of crying and laughter, an eclectic symphony of chaos. All around me, disembodied hands reached out, gripping at the air, fingers trailing smoke and hope lost. In that moment, terror skittered like broken glass over my skin. I gasped, choking on the thickening dread as the reality sheared into a maddening vision of reflected suffering. "Join us!" The chorus of voices shrieked, morphing from melodic children's voices to something guttural and defiant. "We don't want to be alone." The child, too, seemed to contort, its face morphing in rhythm with the walls pulsing, each shift unveiling a hint of something once cherished now corrupted beyond recognition. With an adrenaline-fueled surge, I turned to flee, but the mouth of the door had vanished, the threshold replaced by an indomitable wall of darkness that rose like an abyss behind me. I was irrevocably trapped within their grasp, their years of yearning pouring into me, seeped into the floors beneath my feet. "Do you hear them?" A voice creaked beside me, that sweet tone now edged with malice. "They're crying for you, they've been waiting. Join us so you can be free." That plea wrapped around my mind, tightening like a vice. I staggered back, hand against the wall. With a desperate glance, I searched for a way out, but it closed in, walls dampened by sorrow and despair, echoing their dreadful desires. "Stay with us!" suddenly shouted a multitude of voices, the laughter curdling into echoes of feral rage. Hands reached through the void, pulling, dragging relentlessly. The very air thickened with sorrow, a palpable frenzy that wrapped around me like tendrils made of ink and dread. And then, through the cacophony of shouts and pleas, I heard a whisper slicing through the chaos: "You can't escape what you've become." Each syllable twisted deeper into my core, unraveling my defenses until finally, I felt the overwhelming weight of their sorrow cascading into me. The memories surged like a torrent, faces of those I had tried to save flashing before my eyes in a parade of lost innocence and emptiness. I was drowning, no, dissolving, immersed in their anguished desires, becoming a vessel for their yearning, and then suddenly, the children stopped. The laughter receded into a suffocating silence, giving birth to a new sound, breathless, raspy breaths circling me, the air thick and tangible. Something shifted in the shadows beyond them, where ghostly silhouettes flickered and convulsed as if ready to emerge. A horror more suffocating than before began to take shape, lurching their decay into the light, unveiling a figure, one I had not noticed before, standing silent yet looming at the edge of my mind. Eyes boring into me, void of sympathy, as if they had grasped every fragment of my failing spirit and elevated their desires into overwhelming power. Before I could fully comprehend, it stepped forward, crowned with remnants of despair, the visage stretching wider, filling the darkness with tales of monstrous longing. "It's time," it hissed, and my heart plummeted, racing towards inevitable collapse as the outcry of the child echoed, distorted through layers of twisted grief, and with blinding intensity, the light engulfed my vision. Unraveling. All-consuming, the door opened behind me one last time, and the weight of endless screams ushered forth, filling the very air with cries for salvation. I staggered backward, trapped between torment and unspeakable longing, as I faced the sudden realization something was going to follow me through that door. In the stillness before the storm, a grotesque array of mouths opened around me, chanting in sinister harmony, "Welcome home." The air crackled with a tension I could practically taste, thick as smoke and cloaked in anticipation of imminent horror. I braced myself, heart racing, eyes wide as I staggered backward, nearly falling into the mass of children surrounding me. Their forms seemed to undulate, fusing into something far more sinister than mere spectral remnants. I stood before a gathering of lost souls, stripped of innocence, and encased in malevolence. As the mouths opened wider, the rhythmic chant of "Welcome Home" morphed into a dreadful symphony of muffled cries and echoing laughter, reverberating throughout the confines of that nightmarish chamber. Shadows deepened, twisting and coiling around one another, dark tendrils that gripped the edges of the room, inching toward me like anxious hands yearning for a reunion. I turned, desperate to face the doorway again, but the edges of the entrance twisted into a solid black mass which pulsed, alive and repugnant. The child, its features still writhing in grotesque distortion, reached toward me with a blackened hand, fingers elongated and quivering in a grotesque invitation. "Don't you want to stay?" it whispered, voice dripping with both venom and syrupy sweetness. The longing in that timeless gaze was palpable, and a voyeuristic panic surged through me as I understood, they did not want me to leave. A roar erupted from the group, a manipulative force that carried through the air, throwing me back as the walls began to cave in around me. Eager hands, small and skeletal, began to tug me toward the looming darkness at the back of the shifting mass. I could hear the cacophony rise again, akin to a thrumming in my bones, vibrating with morose energy that threatened to unravel my very essence. "Do you feel it? The pain?" they called in unison, mocking the singularity of my terror. "We are alive! We are one!" An electric jolt ran through the space behind me. Darkness flickered as if aware of my desperate yearning to escape. More figures materialized, each more ghastly than the last. Emaciated limbs reached out, faces eerily familiar in their haunting resemblance. I caught sight of their eyes, once innocent, now filled with a fervent, insatiable longing that eclipsed any shred of humanity that might have remained. Then it hit me, faces were those of the children I could not save over the years, reflections of lives I'd failed to protect. The memories felt like a knife, slicing into my skin, each moment of despair they held tightening like a vice around my heart. I remember their laughter haunting me, the weight of their deaths pressing down, leeching my ability to breathe. With every step I took back, the figures shifted closer, the sickening scent of decay filling my nostrils, a miasma of rot that clung to my skin like a curse. I tried to pull away, to will myself to break free from this surreal nightmare, but my limbs felt heavy, as if drenched in tar. "Join us!" the shadows screamed, voices growing higher and more frantic. I felt the weight of 1,000 eyes crushing me, their silent screams echoing through my mind, a relentless assault on my sanity. "Please," I gasped, still somehow pushing myself further back. "Let me go," but they closed in, a tide of anguished souls surging like a black wave, their calls mutating into frenzied shrieks. Struggling to remain grounded, I clutched my head, the chaos around me amplifying into a thunderous roar. And yet, through the storm, the cycle persisted. "You cannot escape what you've become, you will always be one of us." That sinister whisper punctured through the chaos, grinding into my bones and festering in my soul. In that moment of collective wailing, my thoughts spiraled into a ribbon of disjointed memories, flickering like dying embers of a fire, and then, the shadows parted momentarily, revealing the true horror lurking further back, the amorphous figure from before. Worse than the children, it was an embodiment of all their anguish, twisting and writhing in a grotesque dance. Eyes like hollow clouds gazed back at me, absorbing every ounce of my fear and amplifying it into something unspeakable. It advanced, each footfall echoing like a heartbeat, a dark symphony played to the tempo of my mounting dread. "They've invited you, and now you shall join them," it breathed, a voice like thunder, cascading through me. My heart lurched, sensing the presence of something far more horrific than the longing of those around me. Panic erupted in my chest like wildfire, and with a fatalistic resolve, I turned to the one remaining option. I launched myself at the thick darkness of the wall, praying for it to collapse and swallow me whole. But as I collided with the inky void, a piercing shriek erupted from the children, a symphony of hope turned to relentless despair. The world spun, inverted and fractured, as I was enclosed in the opaque mass, my screams trapped within its suffocating embrace. That I was in darkness, floating as if suspended in the infinite void, but that excruciating silence was short-lived. I felt a tug, an insistent pull urging me back to that room, back to the children and their families' collective sorrow. Abruptly jolting awake among the other silhouettes, I clutched my temples, realizing the monstrous truth. I had returned to where I belonged. The door behind me began to close, that all too familiar chorus once again rising into a frenzy, welcoming my return. And in that dreadful moment, as I felt a claw wrap around my wrist, I realized I would never truly escape this fate. "Welcome home," they sang as the darkness enveloped me completely, and the last vestiges of my consciousness began to flicker. In my final breath, I understood the weight of their whispers. I had unleashed something far darker than I could imagine. I would soon learn that this time, the shadow would no longer be my own. Something lurked from beyond, waiting for me to falter. And suddenly, the darkness began to pulsate, shifting with a mind of its own as the wall behind me released a terrifying groan, revealing just enough light to glimpse a figure emerging, a figure that reflected the very essence of my own face. The air was thick with the perfume of decay, clinging to my skin like a blanket. I felt it seeping through my very essence, twisting my thoughts into a tangled web of despair. As the pulsating darkness enveloped me, I caught fleeting snatches of the children's longing faces contorted, joyously pleading, drawn to the depths of the void I had so stubbornly refused. Yet, amongst that garish display of grief, one wretched shape clawed its way from the depths of darkness behind me. With each inch it gained, my heart pounded louder, drowning in a symphony of trepidation. There was something strangely familiar, its posture, the delicate arch of its neck, the subtle sway of its hair. My breath came in short, jagged bursts as recognition pierced through the horror. It was me. A twisted mockery of my own visage materialized into the flickering light, a grotesque caricature animated by the shadows. This doppelganger wore my despair like a second skin, eyes burning with lightless flame. "Oh, how you've missed so much," it hissed, malicious whispers lacing through its words like poison. "Look at what you've ignored." As it stepped closer, I struggled to tear my gaze away from those mercurial eyes, yet a magnetic draw pulled me in. Within those hollow depths lay a kaleidoscope of memories, staged scenes of abandonment, voices calling out, echoing in desperate harmony. There was a reel of forgotten children, their names lost like ashes in the wind, but their sorrow was painfully vivid, nagging at the recesses of my mind. "Oh, the moments you could have saved them," my reflection crooned, inching nearer, its fingers curling like vines reaching for sunlight. Yet, here you are, begging for reprieve, unaware of your true power. What will you do now? Each word wrapped around me, tightening like a noose, and a tide of clarity crashed upon my consciousness. I recognized its bindings of guilt, the horror of helplessness, the curse of inaction. I was not merely a witness, I was complicit in their suffering. This tremor of realization resonated through the air, shivering the walls of the crumbling chamber. The rotting scent sharpened as shadows moved in wild abandon, their forms morphing into grotesque caricatures that twined with the laughter of lost innocence. The children's faces blurred into a collage of nightmares, their jubilant expressions twisted into macabre grins, their hollow eyes now bore into me with a fevered madness. "Join us!" They chanted, echoing the command from before, yet it was tainted with a fresh Desiree hunger that went beyond mere companionship. Please, I gasped, a plea that dripped from my tongue like venom. I did what I could, did you? Echoed my doppelganger, its smile razor-sharp against the festering darkness. Waving an arm in a grand gesture, it beckoned toward the crowd, a swirling mass of unearthly figures morphing and transforming, revealing their fractured souls layered beneath the surface. You have witnessed the horrors of oblivion, yet here, you stand on the precipice of power. Are you willing to forsake your humanity to save them now? A shudder ran through my body, paralyzing me at the junction of terror and curiosity. The children, once pleading for my aid, shifted, their anguished memories now seemingly pregnant with possibility. They beckoned with ghostly fingers, beseeching me, and I saw reflections of who they could have been, the laughter, the joy, the moments I had robbed them of a chance to live free from sorrow. Please, the crowd urged, their whispers synchronized like a heartbeat, building a crescendo of desperation. Help us! Set us free, their cries curled around my heart, igniting a ferocious inner turmoil. I could feel them drawing close, a torrent of spirits twisted in pain, wrapping around me tentatively but with an undeniable force. It was intoxicating, this mingling of hope and despair, shaking the very foundation of who I was. Will you join their ranks? The mockery of my own voice teased, hovering just beyond my reach. Or will you choose the weight of your regrets instead? And then, in that potent moment of reckoning, a tremor shook the entire space, rending reality like fragile paper. No longer mere whispers, the voices crescendoed into a haunting wail that echoed through my bones. The walls around us buckled and twisted, shadows morphing as if the very fabric of this nightmarish realm was beginning to collapse. With a soul-wrenching scream that lured my instincts to flee, I stumbled toward the heart of the maelstrom, grappling with the raw power that surged around me. It was terrifying, exhilarating. I felt as if I could reshape destiny, trap the echoes of the past into a new dawn. But just as I found my footing, an ungodly shriek erupted from the darkness. The lovely, tormented chorus halted. In the blink of an eye, the faces that once promised salvation morphed into agonized masks of pure dread. The pulsating void behind my reflection began to churn with a renewed vigor, revealing the true horror within the amorphous figure. An abomination of sorrow and rage loomed larger, closing in on us all. Betrayer! You dare defy the cycle? It roared, its voice a cataclysm of raw anguish that ruptured the very air. You will know anguish as you've never known before. Sparks erupted like fireworks amid the tension as the chamber descended into chaotic disarray. And in that chaos, I realized something terrifying. The children were not simply beings trapped in torment, they were harbingers of my fate. As they lunged toward the dark figure in unison, I understood one final truth. They had bound themselves to my soul in this swirling void, and by choiceless fate, I would have to decide that I in that fateful instant. I met the gaze of my own reflect Iona, tormentor now, fused with the agony of my past, and felt my resolve teetering on the brink. Would I join their unholy dance in this calamity, or could I still forge a path to salvation even as the darkness closed in around us? Which fate will you choose? It echoed, the doppelganger's voice, a melodic terror festering in the very marrow of my bones. And as the shadows rose to engulf us, I realized my answer could forever alter the course of our souls and the world beyond. The chamber convulsed, a monstrous entity birthed from a cacophony of despair. A cyclone of dread encased me as the shadows took on grotesque forms, twisting and contorting, echoing the torment that marred the lost children's faces. It all whirled together, me doppelganger, the children, the abomination melding until they were indistinguishable in their anguish. Join us! They screamed in unison, their voices a haunting symphony that filled the room. But now it was different. Despair threaded with an eerie sense of power coursed through me, crackling like static. The energy pooled around my feet, swelling up to my knees, whispering promises of revenge, of retribution against those who had wronged them. I fought against this torrent, yet deep inside, a sinister longing ignited. What did it mean to release them? Could I channel the very agony that once bound them, to grasp the essence of their misery and turn it into something else, something powerful? Embrace it. My reflection said in a voice that was no longer just mockery but a seductive invitation, each word drenching me in velvet promises. You can reshape your fate. What if you didn't just save them, but destroyed all that is wrong? The abomination roared, its maw stretching wider, consuming all sound until it was only a growling thrumming in my chest. You think you are their savior? It jeered, the shadows swirling, merging into a vortex of blackness that threatened to engulf everything I knew. You are their curse. They will drag you down, claim you as their own. Not wanting to testify to the truth of its words, I clenched my jaws and turned my back and saw the children, their faces contorted into masks of anguish, fingers clawing at the air, reaching desperately, pleading. In that moment, I felt their fear anchoring me, a solemn reminder that their torment was mine to bear, but their suffering also offered a pathway. Power surged through me, hungry and intoxicating. I stepped forward, heart racing, relinquishing my will to the shadows swirling at my feet. What if I joined you? I gasped out, desperate and trembling. Each syllable echoed with the weight of a confession that felt like a beginning. Good, it hissed, an unholy glee pervading the oppressive air. Suddenly, the chamber flickered like an old film reel, the walls warping and waving, and for a fleeting moment, I saw glimpses of past horrors played out within, children lost in a storm, forgotten in a desolate night, their faces drifting like clouds filled with sorrow. Each image struck me, seeping into my veins, igniting an urgency. A hand gripped my shoulder, cold as the grave. I turned, finding a child standing just behind me, face darkened, a semblance of hope twinkling in their tear-filled eyes. "Help us," they whispered, and I felt their small voice resonate in my core, as if it alone had the power to pierce the impending darkness. You have to choose quickly. That I glanced back toward the swirling shadows, no longer just a terrifying mass but alive with possibility, craving acceptance as much as destruction. A moment stretched into eternity, hammering at the fragile barriers of my mind. The power to save them was within my grasp, and yet what had that price been? Everything. The abomination snarled, growing larger, its foul breath laced with the scent of decay, and the walls trembled with its fury. "This isn't a choice, it's a sacrifice. You want salvation? You will pay the price." Then the shadows began to coalesce, stretching toward me, quivering like the tongues of flames eager to devour flesh. Desperate, I reached out toward the child, their spectral glow pulling me in. The moment I touched them, a jolt coursed through me, and suddenly, their memories flooded my mind. Fragments of laughter, the warmth of parents, the innocence of a life snatched away. The walls of the chamber began to splinter, light erupting from cracks below, battling against the encroaching darkness. My breath quickened. I felt both unfurling chaos and the delicate pulse of salvation simmering just out of reach. The swirling energies clashed, and the sounds of the children's pleas morphed into howling gales, beckoning me to surrender. "Will you forsake humanity to live in shadows?" My doppelganger called, laughter woven with torment. And just as I teetered on the brink of that decision, the child vanished in a flash of light, leaving only a lingering warmth where they once stood. I swiveled, searching for them, a surge of panic shooting through me. Without warning, the ground beneath me trembled violently, and an unearthly scream erupted from the void behind meth source of my nightmares. The walls of the chamber buckled, and through the cracks, I glimpsed flickering visions of torment and exultation, painful specters of children caught in limbo, now melding with the bubbling chaos. Join me, perhaps? I heard a whisper, sweet yet ominous, coiling around my consciousness like ivy strangling a tree. But then, in a split second, I caught sight of them, the children, culminating in a mass of swirling light, eyes wide with terror and hope, faces contoured by the weight of their choices. They were dissolving within the shadows, each essence extinguished like the last flicker of a candle, and as the world twisted into the abyss, I felt the threads of their lives unraveling. In that moment, the realization hit me: choice was here, now, teetering, and it wouldn't just seal my fate, it would either save or doom their very souls forever, with the malevolent presence looming on one side, and the fading hope of innocent souls on the other. I was caught in a purgatory of my own making. I chose, not simply for me, but for them. But as I opened my mouth to speak the words that could reshape all that surrounded me, a bone-chilling laughter echoed from the abyss, drowning out my determination. The shadows converged, thrusting me into uncertainty, teeth bared, a storm of unspeakable dread upon my back. As I froze in horror, my voice fell silent, swallowed whole by the insatiable dark. Choose wisely, the echo whispered, and just then, the chamber imploded, reality colliding with the chaos, and in that blinding flash, I was consumed. The darkness folded in upon itself, suffocating and thick, as I found myself suspended in an endless void, a chilling shadow where light dared not tread. My body felt weightless, drifting through an expanse where time ceased to exist. The oppressive silence wrapped around me like an unwelcome embrace, laden with an ancient malice that gnawed at my mind. Suddenly, the void rippled, and visions re-emerged, fractured pieces of the children's memories, racing like phantoms towards me. Each beat of my heart resonated, linking me back to their desperate struggles. I saw them, their faces drawn tight with fear, running through murky woods, a shapeless terror thrumming relentlessly in pursuit. With every glance, their cries tugged at my soul like tendrils of smoke, wrapping tighter, threatening to sever me from any flicker of hope, and then they began to plead. They called my name, their voices rising in a chilling crescendo, weaving a spell of yearning that clutched at my heart. "Help us! Please," they whispered, their once gentle tones now laced with agony. Abruptly, the darkness shifted again, and I was hurled back into the shattered remnants of the chamber. The walls were smeared with a grotesque tableau of despair, images of the children superimposed over scenes of laughter and warmth, shattered by the abomination's unholy presence. Each tableau vibrated with conflicting emotions, and I felt an old familiarity wash over me, a connection to something long buried. That I staggered forward, my feet unsteady on the uneven ground. There it stood, the abomination, its form an ever-shifting mass, a distortion of reality that clawed at the edges of my sanity. It was both beautiful and grotesque, draped in tendrils of darkness and light. The laughter twisted through my mind again, echoing off the walls, taunting me with jubilation as chaos swirled all around. "Look at what you've unleashed," it hissed, its voice like shattered glass scraping against bone. "Aren't they lovely?" All that they could have been now crumbling into despair. Around me, the walls writhed and glimmered, the faces of the children shifting like smoke, their yearning transformed into a tangible energy crackling in the air. Could they hear me? Would they remember this moment? I reached out, fingers trembling, ready to connect with them, but the reality of what had transpired stung my heart. The choice I had omitted clung to me like a rancid reminder. "Join me in this dance of shadows," the abomination continued, glaring down at me with eyes resembling swirling pools of black water. "Think of the power we could share, a world where your pain births strength. Reject your humanity eternal." I fought the urge to succumb. The realities I could carve from the corners of my torment were buried under the weight of their suffering, a burden I knew I could wield, but at what cost? Then, across the chaotic expanse, I caught a glimpse of the child who had first reached out to me, their ethereal form flickering like a beacon. "Help us!" they cried again, and I could see the spark of hope dwindling in their eyes, rapidly fading like the light of a dying flame. The ground quaked violently beneath me, splintering as the abomination unleashed another thunderous roar. "Choose! Or they will fade with the light of your indecision." Panic surged, coursing through my veins like ice water, biting and cruel. The chamber threatened to collapse as the shadows surged forward, hungry and unyielding, a tide of despair ready to crash over me. My breath quickened, caught by the tempest of emotions swirling around, a blend of rage, fear, and sorrow intertwined. "That we are more than what was taken from us," echoed the chorus of the children, the power of their voices weaving together the threads of hope amidst the chaos. "We will not succumb. You can help us, but how? How could I bridge that chasm between despair and salvation?" My heart hammered in my chest, and I felt the pulse of their pain, the crushing weight of their grief clawing at me. For an infinitesimal moment, I closed my eyes, tuning out the chaos around me. And then, a flash of inspiration broke through the dark, the promise of sacrifice. "I will give everything for you," I shouted, the words erupting like a storm that echoed against the bleak walls, a vow forged in my very soul. The abomination froze, the laughter fading into a distracted hush, confusion flickering across its monstrous visage. "Everything?" it hissed, curiosity dripping from its voice. "Do you dare?" In the thick air, the children surged forward, their faces radiating hope, drawing nearer, the light amplifying the darkness around us. I stepped into the shadows, heart racing, ready to confront whatever lay beyond. But just as they reached for me, the ground buckled once more, a roaring wave spilling against the threshold of reality. In that volatile moment, as the chamber teetered on the brink of explosion, the ambient sounds of pleading faded into a single, spine-chilling word: "No." And then the world dimmed. I felt the shadows clawing at my senses, dragging me down into the abyss, and there, just before I faded from view, a final image seared into my mind, the faces of the children, wide-eyed and terrified, unraveling like threads in an unforgiving storm. As the darkness swallowed me whole, I gasped. "What have I done?" Their screams echoed around me, haunting within the grasp of an unfathomable terror, preceding the shattering silence. In that instant, something new lurked in the depths of my mind, waiting, anticipating as I slipped further into the unknown, a knowledge that perhaps the true horror had only just begun. The door closed behind me with a finality that felt like a death knell. I stood in the aftermath, a hollow shell of the person I once was, consumed by shadows and regrets. The chamber, forever altered, pulsed with a dark energy that clung to me, wrapping its insidious tendrils around my very soul. A new presence lingered in the air, one that echoed my own despair yet seemed to radiate something deeper, more sinister. Slowly, the silence roared in my ears, each heartbeat a reminder of what I had relinquished. I had chosen to embrace the darkness rather than flee from it. I had chosen to save them, but at what cost? The laughter had faded, replaced by a chilling stillness that wrapped around me like a shroud. And as I stood in that suffocating silence, an undeniable truth clawed at the edges of my consciousness. The children I tried to save mixed with their fears, their pain. They had become a part of me. And in my quest to liberate them, I had unwittingly forged a bond far more sinister. The walls thrummed alive with energy, flashes of memories igniting behind my eyelids, visions of anguish and loss swirling together, merging into an undeniable reality I had crafted. I was not merely their savior now, I was bound to their torment. Each flicker of light, Each shadow that danced upon the walls whispered promises of power and vengeance, creating a grotesque tapestry of what I had become. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the chamber, its deep timbre resonating like rolling thunder, reverberating through every inch of my being. "Welcome, my dark shepherd," it hissed, and the shadows thickened, swirling in an ecstatic embrace. "You created this realm, you are its heartbeat. But don't you see? You sought power beyond comprehension, a pact that intertwines the fates of your reality, and there's." Panic clawed at my insides, my breath hitching in my throat as the figure materialized before me, blurring in and out of Clarissa, grotesque reflection of my own self, birthed from despair and twisted craving. It wore my face, yet distorted with shadows, a hollow shell that mocked me with gleeful malice. "You wanted to save them, didn't you?" it whispered, voice dripping with temptation. "But in the end, you've only succeeded in your own demise. There's a fate worse than death, and here we dwell in eternal servitude, forever tethered to the echoes of our own tragedies. No!" I screamed, finally summoning the strength to break the seductive hold of despair. "You're wrong. I can still free them." But as I looked around, the chamber shifted around me, revealing a swirling maelstrom of the children's faces, their features slipping through the veil of memory like ash carried on the wind, joy mingling with their deep-seated agony. Then it hit me, truth that crystallized in that dark space. I had thought I could wield the power amid their cries, but all I could do was watch as their essence seeped into me like a parasite, drowning my every resolve. Their suffering had become intertwined with mine, an unholy merger I couldn't escape. I hadn't freed them, I had consumed their fate. In your quest for power, you've lost more than you can comprehend. The doppelganger of my own reflection laughed, its voice now blending with the echoes of the children, turning into a chorus of haunting mirth. "You'll be the architect of despair, spread it to every waking moment, feeding on the very lives you sought to protect." As dread gripped me, I felt the ground churn beneath my feet, a dark vortex forming, alive with rage and insatiable hunger. The walls warped, distorting into grotesque shapes, images of their anguish flashing through the chaos, each face just a reminder of my failure. "Join us," they implored, their once cherubic pleas contorted into derisive calls. "You were meant to be one with us, the harbinger of despair." Then, without warning, the walls erupted, flooding the space with darkness, forceful tendrils grasping and clawing, pulling me toward the center where the heart of the chamber pulsated. My reflection loomed closer now, spectral hands reaching for mine. "You can never escape what you were meant to be," it whispered, tantalizing temptation echoed behind its words. "You were chosen to shepherd the lost, to endure their suffering while amplifying your own. Yes, sweet power awaits, embrace it. Let our fates be entwined." Tethered by despair, I gazed into those hollow eyes, reflecting my very essence, begging me to succumb. But as the shadows surged and darkness threatened to consume me, I felt an unfamiliar spark within, a flicker of defiance that had lingered beneath the surface. I had been deceived into thinking my choice had sealed their fate, yet now I realized my truth. I was not the harbinger of despair. I could still fight. With a surge of adrenaline, I ripped myself from the grasping shadows and thrust forth the light of my own conviction. "You will not claim me!" I roared, pushing against the darkness, the words ebbing and flowing from my lips like a blade cutting through a veil of grief. "I will not be your pawn." In that moment, the room convulsed, shadows retreating momentarily, revealing the children's faces, eyes wide with both fear and flickering hope. I sensed their desperation thrumming in the air like the strings of a tightly wound bow, and with each heartbeat, I connected to their essence, drawing upon that fading light. "I choose not despair, but hope. I choose to free you." The air crackled like thunder as a scorching light exploded from within me, erupting through the room, illuminating the horrors lurking in darkness. "I am not lost," I screamed with all the force I could muster. "I am what you created, but I will not yield to torment any longer." The eruption sent the shadows into chaotic disarray. The abomination screamed, contorting and writhing like a marionette severed from its strings, as the children coalesced around me, anchored by my will. The embrace of despair shattered like brittle glass, revealing an exited door once more lingering at the back, beckoning with false promises and sly grins. No. They screamed in unison, their voices scraping across my senses like fingernails on a chalkboard. "You cannot escape. You are one of us. You belong here." But amid their rage, the flickering light within pushed back, consuming their desperate cries, allowing my resolve to sharpen. "I was wrong to think I could save you, yet I can still bring light to the darkness you reside in." I surged towards the door, propelled by a raw determination that lit my path. "Together, we will find peace." The ground tremored one last time as I reached for the handle, and the last sounds of despair echoed around me, fading into a visceral silence. I grasped the door and pulled with every ounce of strength. A blinding light erupted, revealing not just the world beyond, but the possibility of reclaiming every shred of innocence lost. As I stepped through, the darkness shrieked in agony, the last echoes of the children's voices swallowed by the light. Yet just as the heat enveloped me, something jerked within, a chilling reminder of my own journey. In that moment, clarity struck. A horrifying truth settled in my gut like a lead weight, twisting like a jagged knife. For though I escaped, though I had triumphed over their despair, I could feel the lingering traces of darkness etched upon my soul, merging with something much darker. I had escaped, but I bore the mark of an eternal curse. Standing on the threshold of a new dawn, I took a breath, realizing that I carried this darkness with me, a whispering reminder of what had transpired. I was free, yet forever changed, and with every flicker of joy life would bring, the shadow would always be present, clinging to the corners of my vision. I felt it there, a patient predator lurking in the recesses of my mind, waiting for the moment when my resolve would waver, and I would slip back into the dark. As the bright morning sun splashed over my skin, I could almost hear it beckon, whispering promises of power, pain, and a reminder as old as time itself: welcome home.